Hello and welcome to another episode of Search Off the Record, a podcast coming to you from the Google Search team, discussing all things search and having some fun along the way. My name is Martin, and I'm joined today by Gary and John from the Search Relations team, of which I'm also part of. Hi John, hi Gary.
Hi Martin.
Hi.
So, I have I don't know if I want to say fight to pick, but something that I noticed talking to people at conferences recently is that don't you find it interesting where people put focus in their SEO work? Because looking back at like the last couple of years of conferences, I remember the time when everyone was talking about voice search as being like the next big thing. And I was like, no, just make sure your content is good first, because this conversation about voice search is interesting and fascinating. But looking at these websites that you people put there, they are not helpful or useful to me as a user trying to find things. Or the Core Web Vitals, I think that was the hardest message to get across, because it is important, but it's not as important as people might think it is. And so I thought maybe we should talk a little bit about what you think people should pay more attention to, or like what you think are things in SEO that are worthwhile doing and are not getting as much of the spotlight. Not necessarily that everyone has to do it all the time, but like things that, people don't think much about apparently. Do you have things that come to mind? Gary, I know that you're posting things on LinkedIn sometimes, and I think if I remember correctly, you've been doing like public service announcements in that direction, no?
Yeah.
So what would you say people should pay more attention to or less attention to?
I do have some thoughts.
Okay, shoot.
I have many thoughts.
Let us know. What are your thoughts?
Since you led with the LinkedIn PSA posts, public service announcement posts, those are all technical in nature, and for a good reason. I like to post about technical things. I like to think about technical things when it comes to the internet. And that's primarily why I'm posting about those topics, but also because every now and then we notice that big site owner or big site SEO will miss critical basic things. And I still think that we should tell people more that the technical things still matter a lot. Because, for example, if Googlebot cannot reach your site, or rendering fails miserably, or there are no tokens, words on the site, or on a page, then there's not that much that Google can do for you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So technical SEO is still important? It's like all of those?
Yeah, but when it comes to technical SEO, then there's lots of weird things that people like to obsess about. And what I really wish is that people focused on the very basics, like basically how the internet works, and try to trace back a connection step by step, or trace back how search works step by step, and try to fit their content or page or whatever into that frame, and try to figure out what's going wrong. For connections, there's plenty of resource on the internet that you can follow. I'm pretty sure that Moz had a very good guide about how a connection is made from the user to the server that is servicing your site, and what are the potential things that can go wrong. From a search engine perspective, we also document that on Onesie, on developers.google.com/search. And then from indexing perspective, that's I guess that's more proprietary. So I would go to a search engine's documentation. Most of them have some documentation about how they function, and just try to figure out where your content might be failing or where your page might be failing. Because honestly, it's okay, this is patronizing, but it's not rocket science. Was that too much of a rant?
It's not rocket science, but it is not obvious for everyone, maybe.
So how would you recognize if it's a technical thing or something hand-wavy quality-wise?
There's this tool called Webmaster Tools, and there's this other tool called Search Console. And they can be pretty damn good at recognizing technical issues. I think they mostly, they can also help with ranking issues, but less so, I think. With technical issues, they can definitely help. And if that's not enough, then you can also use Chrome's or your favorite browser's built-in developer tools for certain things. Like, for example, if the server is down for everyone but for you for some reason, well, actually, that's not right. You could imitate the user agent to see if you are accidentally blocking some specific user agent, such as Googlebot or Bingbot or whatever bot.
But how would you recognize if it's a technical thing or a quality thing? Like you look into Search Console or even Webmaster Tools and you see your traffic is down like 50%. It's like,
right.
Does this mean it's a quality thing? Like what do you do as a next step?
Well, first you want to figure out whether the page is in search or not. Because if the page is not in search, then you already narrowed it down to two very specific things. And then you can go to, for example, Search Console, URL inspection tool, and see if Googlebot can even access that page. If it cannot, then you have a very clear technical problem. And then you start digging into connection, for example, or try to figure out where the connection might be interrupted, for example, by a WAF or otherwise firewall. If Googlebot can access it, then again, Search Console will tell you if it's a canonicalization problem, like, for example, Google picked another canonical, then you can dig into that. I think that's more abstract, but you can still try to figure out, or, well, actually, I think most of the cases you can figure out why Google would pick a different canonical, because last I looked, and last was maybe a year ago or so, the vast majority of the duplication came from exact same duplicate content. So it was duplicate to the letter, which could be caused by misconfigured site or weirdly configured site. For example, you are not throwing a 404 when I put in a random URL.
Okay, but for all of this, you have to find a URL first, right? Or do you just take the homepage? Like when you debug these things, what do you take?
Usually I start with the homepage because I can't speak for other search engines, obviously, but from Google's perspective, the homepage is the most important page on the site. And homepage is a little vague here because it can be the page wherever users are landing on when they enter your domain name or host name. Like if www.example.com redirects to www.example.com/foo/bar, then that will be your homepage. Check that because we, as in Google, will try very hard to index that or crawl and index that. If that's not indexed, then you probably have some problems. And then you can start with the homepage. You can start looking at how Googlebot is behaving when it's trying to access it. If Googlebot can access it, and if it's canonical, then I would take a very deep look at what is on your page, as in, are there actually sentences? Are there spammy looking things, perhaps, that should not be there?
So one thing that you said, John, is like when you see like the traffic drops. And that's something that I had discussed with multiple people. And I find that very, very interesting because when you say traffic drops, what does that mean to you? Is it impressions? Are you going to Search Console and click on the performance report and you just look at the impressions going down, or clicks? Or do you actually measure a real business impact, like you're selling only half as many things as you used to sell last month?
Usually what I see from people is that they focus on the traffic on their site. And they look at something like analytics and they say, oh, I get so many visitors and so many visitors from search engines. And that number went down significantly. I don't know like if this is representative for all people that work on these sites, but it feels like something like analytics would be their primary dashboard. And then if they see something really weird happening there, they would go maybe to Search Console to try to figure out what it actually means. And the aspect of ROI, or kind of the value of that traffic, I see that as something that a lot of these SEOs tend not to focus on primarily, because my assumption is it's just a very long lead time there. Like you can turn your website off now, but you might still have people who are kind of like paying for something for a while. And then it's like, well,
that's true.
It's not as direct.
That's true.
But I do think it's something where I sometimes feel it's misleading to just purely focus on the traffic. And I see that with our sites as well. A year or two ago, we would rank for the word Google in Canada or something like that in the search documentation, of course. I hope the Google website ranks for the word Google, but like the search documentation would rank for the word Google somewhere on the first page. And we got tons of traffic there, but all of that traffic was basically irrelevant. And then if you only look at the traffic and all of that irrelevant traffic goes away, then it might look like you lost a lot of traffic. But actually, it's like all of those things are people that weren't relevant for your site anyway. So you almost need to look at the bigger picture of all of the traffic that's gone, but also keep in mind, like, well, a lot of this was useless, and I should maybe focus on the queries that people used and the clicks and impressions for those, or individual like lower level pages of the site, and kind of track those a little bit more.
And I think this is an amazing tip and something that people should pay attention to a little more than they probably do. I think we had a episode with Lizzie and Gary where we talked about de-SEOing the Google search documentation.
Oh.
And that's something that I, for instance, think people should look into, no?
But yeah, we did have an episode on that, and it was exactly because we were ranking for everything and my grandmother for whatever reason. And then when we started taking a deeper look, then we realized that it's at least partially our fault, because we were optimizing very strongly for video and certain keywords that I don't want to say because Lisa, our producer, will beep it out. I think it was a very, very interesting exercise, also very humbling, because as we were changing words or removing words from certain pages, our traffic just like shoo, and it didn't feel good. Let's just say that. But then one way we measure whether we are, let's say, successful with the documentation is how much feedback we get for a specific page, and specifically how much negative feedback. And the number of negative feedbacks went away. The number of irrelevant feedbacks went away. Like, for example, someone was looking for beep video, and they would leave a comment that they could not find that kind of video on our site. And it's like, duh. But yeah, I think it was a good exercise.
Hopefully not.
We have a much more different problem if they do. But anyway, it was a good exercise, also very humbling.
Okay, so kind of focusing on feedback might be actually a faster feedback loop. Oh my gosh, feedback. Too much feedback. But kind of like people's comments or up and down votes, that might be something where it would be a little bit faster to recognize, oh, this is actually a useful page or an irrelevant page.
This is sidetracking this, but I found the up-down metric completely useless, because you still have to figure out what's wrong with it or why people didn't like it. And then you are like, This is a perfectly good page. Like, I wrote it. I know that it's perfect. And then people, or I don't know, like 99.7% of people are downvoting it. And you're like, why?
Yeah, what does that mean?
What does it mean?
It's not good.
Okay.
Thanks, but why? How? Well, okay, so that's one thing. And while we're here at irrelevant and relevant and helpful, we recently had an episode about quality in search. And I think that's another thing. How do I spot? I wrote the page, so clearly it is perfect and helpful and useful and amazing. But then people disagree, as you say. How do you think about that? What do you do then? How can I make my content more helpful, better, more useful? I don't know.
I think you have to put the right keywords in the H1s.
No, John,
Sorry.
come on.
Sorry.
Why would you do that?
Internal linking? Is it that?
Oh, good.
The HTTPS certificate.
No, but seriously, that's the thing. Like, there's all these tools that I can just look at and I see that something's good or something's bad. But for quality, how do I go about that?
What if quality is actually simpler than at least most people think?
I find it scary.
What if it's about writing the thing that will help people achieve whatever they need to achieve when they come to the page? And that's it.
Okay.
So you mean I need to put myself into their perspective?
Now we are reframing.
That sounds hard.
The one thing I sometimes run into when talking with people is that they'll be like, well, I feel I need to make this page, and I made this page 4 users in air quotes, which you don't see. But then when I look at the search results, it's like 9,000 other people also made this page.
Yeah.
It's like, is this really adding value to the internet? And that's sometimes kind of a weird discussion to have. It's like, well, it's a good page, but who needs it? There are like so many other versions of this page already, and people are happy with those.
Yeah. And this also is kind of related to the age-old topic that if you are a new site, then how can you break into your niche? Oh, I said niche. Oh, I'm sorry. I think on today's internet, like back when I was doing air quote SEO, it was already hard. For certain topics or niches, it was absolutely a nightmare, like the mesothelioma, whatever it's called. That was just impossible to break into. Legal topics, it was impossible to break into. And I think by now we have so much content on the internet that there's a very large number of topics where it is like 15 years ago or 20 years ago, that mesothelioma topic where it was impossible to break into. And back then, I remember Matt Cutts, former head of web spam, if you don't know, he was doing these videos. And in one of the videos, he said that try to offer something unique or your own perspective to the thing that you are writing about. And obviously, if you are writing about that I have no idea how to say that, then the number of perspective or available perspectives, free perspectives, is probably already gone. But if you find a niche where people are not talking too much about, then suddenly it's much easier to break into. So basically, this is me saying that you can break into most niches if you know what you are doing and if you are actually trying to help people.
Okay. So Antarctic friendly garden furniture.
Okay.
You're being cynical, but if you look at the peninsula, there is sun, and sometimes it's like 20 plus degrees Celsius.
Oh my God. Okay.
I run into this at the moment fairly regularly, where I'm searching for something. Like I have some physical thing in my hand and it has like an ID and a name and everything. And I search for it and there are like 3 results on the whole internet. That's the kind of thing where I'm like, whoa, like, it would be kind of neat if someone wrote something about this, where it's like there's still a lot of topics where there just isn't a ton of content out there.
Yeah. And I think the other big motivator is, as always, money. People are trying to break into niches that make the most money. I mean, I would do the same thing probably. But if you write about these topics that most people don't write about, let's say just 3 people wrote about it on the internet, then maybe you can capture some traffic. And then if you have many of those, then maybe you can even outdo those high traffic niches.
Yeah.
Okay. And when it comes to things like de-SEOing for queries that you don't want, if you find content that you created that is maybe too specific or not very helpful and doesn't get much traffic, would you delete that?
No.
Why not?
I think the pure traffic number is misleading and not something I would focus on. What I might do there is try to recognize when something is low quality and bad. And that's something where you could say, well, either fix it or delete it. But if it's just low traffic, then that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It might just mean that at the moment it's not very popular. But maybe yours is the only page on the internet that exists of that topic. And then it's like, well, you can delete it, sure, but then nobody will get that traffic.
Okay. But what if I have something else that I think is better positioned and it gets more traffic and it's the same kind of thing, more or less?
But your keyword was kind of.
Well, I mean, it's something like you could merge things, obviously,
okay.
or you can redirect if one replaces the other. I mean, those, to me, are kind of basic site maintenance tasks that you would do. And we do that all the time on our site, where it's like we take pages, we merge them, and then everyone freaks out and is like, oh my gosh, this page disappeared. What happened?
True.
What does it mean, Google? And we're like, oh, we just cleaned up. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of stuff that everyone should be doing on their site, like reconsidering, like, do I actually need this content? Is this content still relevant? Can I combine this? Can I simplify it? I think that's the kind of stuff that everyone should just be doing over time, especially if you have a website that is kind of content focused and not transactional. Like if you have an e-commerce site, then of course, like you probably want to keep separate product pages. You can't just say like, oh, this is the page where you can buy a t-shirt and we'll send you a random one. You kind of want that specific one.
Wait, that's a business idea.
Finally, you don't have to make choices. We make the choices for you. You just say, I want a t-shirt.
Send me a t-shirt.
It's a good idea. I like that. How would we optimize this so that people find it in search?
AI
everywhere.
This is one of these topics that people are paying so much attention to it because ChatGPT and OpenAI is like the new kid in town and woo, wow. But I don't know. I think AI is great for certain things and is rubbish for others. It's a tool like everything else. I feel like that's an overrated thing. What tool would you think is a thing that people are not using enough of? Or are there any things or
voice search?
Voice search. Yeah, definitely. What are techniques or things that people should do more?
Posting on Google+. Wait, no.
That is really unfortunate. Yeah, that was a great suggestion, I don't know, 20 years ago.
What? How old do you think I am?
It didn't exist at the time. Well, how old was it? Is it like 10 years ago? I don't know. Was it? I think it was 10 years ago, no? 12, 13 years ago? I can't remember. It feels like ages ago.
I don't know what I had for breakfast, so it must be older than breakfast.
Definitely older than breakfast, yeah. But also, good question. I don't know what I had for breakfast either.
Wait, what was your question actually?
My question actually was, what are other things that people should be paying more attention to maybe? Because we've talked about like, how do I know if it's a quality or a technical thing? And we've said technical things, don't ignore them, but don't necessarily like over focus on them because what good is that? But then again, if I let my technical things slide entirely, that's also a bad thing. So what are things people should be doing maybe more of or look at more of?
Side tracking. I don't think generative AI tools are that bad. It's the how it's used. I think that's the problem many times. Obviously not always. And it can be incredibly helpful when, for example, you have a writer's block and then you are trying to put out a page very fast because deadlines or whatever. And then it can come up with a structure and perhaps word suggestions even, or word variations in the text that will work well for users.
I kind of like it for things like brainstorming, but I don't know, like sidetracking the sidetrack, maybe we should talk about AI in a future episode. What do you think?
Ooh, yeah, let's do that. That makes sense. Let's put that on the list.
So we talked about some kind of technical things that people should ignore. What do you think about crawl errors? Is that also one of those things you should ignore?
So technical thing. It's literally the first thing that I talked about.
So it's like if you see 5,000 crawl errors on your site in Search Console, is that good or bad?
Well, but it depends on the crawl error. Again, it's something that you probably want to know. Like, for example, a 404 means that what does it mean? Not found. And then you can ignore that if you don't think that that particular URL should serve any content. But then if you look at errors in the 500 range, then suddenly you are like, oh, okay, my server had some hiccups and in a given time, 90% of the responses were all in the 500 range, or the statuses were all in the 500 range. Maybe I need to check that out.
Okay, that's a super useful way of differentiating. Like 500s, definitely check those out. 404s, 410s, like look at some samples and then like ignore most of them.
Decide.
Okay, so if like some negative SEO site links to 1 million of my pages and they all go to 404, it's like, meh, okay. Fantastic. Now I can sleep in peace.
So in general for error pages, this just popped in my mind. So I used to have an image hosting service and I was smart enough that I wanted to capture the traffic that went to 404s. And for every single 404, I did relatively expensive database lookup, which was very stupid in hindsight, because, well, if you are a biggish site, then you are going to have lots of 404s. And a database lookup in all of those cases, probably not good for your server. So don't do that. Do cheap lookups or just have static pages or something. Don't be a Gary.
Don't be a Gary. Okay.
Well, actually, you can be a Gary, but don't be this kind of Gary.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. Now a more content kind of question. Should my titles and headings kind of be the same? At least my H1 and my title, should they be the same? Or
I mean, they can
to
be.
Consensus? That's, yeah. Is it important?
I mean, you can make them the same, but you can also make them different. I wouldn't put like Crazy Green Smurf as a title and then have a heading about SEO tips, for example. But that's just me. I mean, maybe they should be kind of related, but they don't have to be the same.
Why? Maybe we should start a trend.
Okay.
Crazy Green Smurfs.
I hope that's nothing inappropriate.
Crazy Green Smurf.
Okay, cool. I thought this was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that was interesting. And I think there's probably more things out there. So for all of you out there who listen to this, let us know in the comments or on Twitter if you have things on your mind that you think are probably done not often enough or not paid attention to as much as they should have. And let us know what you think of the episode. It was really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Gary and John, for being here with me and talking a little bit about things that are on our mind to this topic. And
woohoo! Thumbs up.
Well, I think that's it for this episode, isn't it? Sweet. Awesome. In that case, I do hope that this was fun and useful for all of you out there. And in the next episode, we will be talking about what we think might happen next year. And we're going to review what happened this year. So we do a bit of an end of year episode. How do you feel about that?
Overpromising. It's like, what is happening next year? I don't know. It's so much pressure.
No. Well, exactly. We're going to say we don't know. We don't announce the future, but that's the thing that we can do, no? We can say we don't make promises for the future. All right. In that case, thank you all, folks. And thanks for listening. And goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Oh, bye.
Au revoir. We've been having fun with these podcast episodes, and we hope that you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop us a note on Twitter at Google Search C, or chat with us at one of the next upcoming events that we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and goodbye!